Hello, my name is Chris Davidson, and my thesis is over the death penalty and the impact it has on society, both economically, politically, and morally as well. In perspective, the total amount of executions in the US dating back to 1976 is over 1,400 and continues to grow. Of those executions, a large majority did take place in the 1990s and early 2000s, as you can see in the graph, with a steady decline going into the 2010 region and so on. But there are currently 31 states that still have death penalties in effect, including the military and the federal government. While there are states that have had the death penalty abolished for over a century now, and some are even more recent, such as Maryland that abolished the death penalty in 2013, and Nebraska in May of this year, which Nebraska has 10 inmates still on death row and are currently still loosening and figuring out the kinks and whether or not they will carry those out or have an alternative punishment. Uh, the death penalty viewed by law enforcement is viewed as inefficient and a waste of money. They feel, there are alternative areas that can be used and utilized to still get justice on criminals doing heinous crimes such as murder and anything of the like. And the death penalty is viewed as a poor use of taxpayer dollars, considering millions of dollars are spent on just one death penalty case with court fees, judge fees, lawyer fees, and so forth. So it's got its cons, and then there's the pros of people's moral belief of getting the justice that they think is right or is necessary. So public opinion does have a strong hold on where policies are to date. Though officials do prefer to veer away from the death penalty, since public opinion is so strong, that is why there are a large amount of states, 31, that have yet to change policies, but there is progression, and you can see that through just the facts of less executions going out and carried out, paired with states wanting to look at the economical side of things and kind of highlight the fact that there are alternatives that can be pursued. And of those, there is life without parole, life with 5 years added, life with restitution to the victims' families that will be more cost efficient and still hand out justice and keep the family at ease, at least on a case by case basis, because everybody is different and has a different moral belief and standing. So there are quite a few obstacles for policy change, of course, both public opinion and getting a majority vote in that manner. That being said, this does go to show that this topic is complex and it does require three disciplinary perspectives or more, but primarily political, economical, and sociological standpoints were the most influential throughout the research. And from the political standpoint, it is a pretty broad view, but it does point in on government officials that heavily rely on public opinion to set their agendas and implement policies, along with actual candidates running in elections that look at the public and want to approve or support and receive their votes based on how they may answer a question in a debate. And then there's the economical standpoint, in which there's a lot of hidden costs that go into death penalty cases. As I mentioned earlier, it's upwards to the millions ranging per case, which that goes back to the law fees and judge fees. On average, they could spend 40 to 60 hours a month. And when you look at the time spent and time paid out, it's not just one lawyer, it's the lawyer and their staff, the judge and his staff, and then the defendants. So there's a lot of hidden costs that people may not take into consideration when they vote or choose to support a certain issue. And that's kind of where the sociological perspective came to be very influential in research. They look to learn about people and how they think and how they justified supporting the death penalty or opposing it. They did research on focus groups that allowed them to see into the mind of just the average person, both supporting the death penalty and opposing it. And they noticed that many of them would base their result on the death penalty on a case-by-case basis, in which one crime could be worse than the other, so the outcome should be different. But then when given the option of having alternatives such as life without parole or death penalty or life without parole with restitutions, knowing they had those options rather than death penalty or no death penalty, was able to kind of sway their opinion a little bit, knowing justice would still be served even if it wasn't the death penalty. And that's the main thing they came to the conclusion of in their research, was people are going to believe what they want to believe or stand by their morals, but when given information and just educated about the actual issue or topic, their views kind of changed. And that's not being influenced or trying to influence or persuade them to believe a certain way, because there were people in the research who were opposed to the death penalty who then supported it, reading different scenarios of maybe an adult killing a child and then swaying the opinions of those opposing the death penalty, just educating them about hidden costs involved and the availability of alternative punishments, such as life without parole, for instance. So for this thesis, it was necessary to look at each perspective and try to look at it objectively, and pinpointing it only on political and what policies can happen and costs. It's kind of closed-minded. It does take knowing how people think, because you do need to know things like that to try to get your point across. If you want to change a policy, you need to know how the public sees and believes a certain issue should be played out, rather than being objective to or oblivious to public opinion in that manner. So to sum it up, this does answer the question of why we need multiple perspectives looking at an issue. For this one in particular, you got political agendas from the political standpoint, along with cost imbalances and hidden costs, basically, and understanding the public opinion as well. And knowing all of those aspects, you can't really receive that information looking at just the political standpoint or just the economical. It takes broadening the research and looking for similarities and ways to support the argument as a whole. The main thing that was found throughout the research was there was a difference in murder rate in non-death penalty states versus death penalty states. As you can see in the graph, um, murder rates were higher in death penalty states, but that still hasn't quite changed policies like you would expect. And that kind of managed to be the theme throughout the research. Whether or not people know or don't know about certain statistics, for this particular issue, people pretty much hold their ground in their beliefs. And that's why the US is where it's at regarding this issue. You have 30 states plus that still have a death penalty in effect, and then you have the remaining who do not. But it takes educating the public, and generally the research is a bit lacking just in regards to learning more about people, maybe doing more focus groups, because focus groups were a little bit newer in regards to the issue of the death penalty. The research that had been done earlier and through polls is mainly yes and no questions, and you don't really learn about the people rather than give them options and educate them and inform them correctly, rather than simplifying it too much where a person may support the death penalty, but their alternative was only to not have death penalty, not giving them options such as life without parole or letting them know any costs involved. So the research was pretty consistent with each other in the costs that go into death penalty cases, the political outcomes that can come from policy change, and how public opinion is basically the biggest weight that this issue has and is the foundation of this issue. So should the US continue to use capital punishment and the death penalty? I would say based off the research, it is suggested it should be abolished, and that's based off of the death penalty being unconstitutional and being economically inefficient. So a way to save millions of dollars, and with how ineffective the death penalty can be, in which somebody on death row could be there for multiple years before their penalty being carried out. So not only are you paying millions for court fees, you're still paying to keep them alive anyway. So there are ways to effectively serve justice. I mean, life without parole. And then you can give the restitution to the victimized family. So there are ways to still keep some people happy, and then there's no way to keep everybody happy, just in the fact that people are stuck in their ways and just some can't be changed. But if you inform and educate enough people, there are ways to change policies, I believe, and that would be the best bet for a more efficient judicial system in which the death penalty is no longer in effect and millions of dollars are saved a year. Thanks for listening, and I hope you can form a logical opinion off of my research and thesis, even in short time. Thanks.